Good evening and welcome to tonight's program, African Immigrants 2023 and the Issues That Matter. My name is Nazareth and I'm the program coordinator here at the Africa Center. We're thrilled to be presenting this program in partnership with several New York City organizations, African Communities Together, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, UndocuBlack, the Gambian Youth Organization, and Documented, who are all working tirelessly and advocating for African communities and Black migrants in New York City. On behalf of the Africa Center, thank you for all the work that you do for our communities. Tonight's discussion will be moderated by Fisayo Okare. She's a journalist and newsletter writer for Documented, a nonprofit news site devoted solely to covering New York City's immigrants and the policies that affect their lives. And with that, I'll turn it over to Fisayo.
Thank you so much, Nazareth, for the introduction. And thank you to everybody who is able to join us today on the call. And a big thank you to the Africa Center as well for providing this platform for us today to be able to discuss the key issues that African immigrants in New York City and the US at large and the African diaspora at large as well are facing in 2023. And I also want to thank the speakers for taking some time out of their busy schedule to join us today. Thank you so much. Today we're going to be speaking about the experiences of Black immigrants, as you've already read on our program invite. And we're also going to be addressing New York City's response to Black asylum seekers. And the organizations who have been working with immigrants in New York City who are on this call today with us are also going to speak to us about the work they've been doing to educate and advocate for immigrants in New York City. As Nazareth said, Fisayo Okare, I work for Documented as a newsletter writer. And at Documented, we write about immigrants' experiences, the policies that affect immigrants' lives. And most recently for the newsletter that I wrote that went out yesterday, we published a story about the street in the Bronx, 17 Abdullahi Toure Way, the number 17, to honor the lives of the 17 migrants that died last year in the fire incident in the Bronx, and Abdullahi Toure to honor the man, a Gambian immigrant who is highly revered by the Gambian community and communities in the Bronx as well for his community service. For that story, I spoke with Salim Drammeh, who is on this call today with us. And I'm going to start with him as our first panelist. Thank you so much for speaking with us, for joining us today, Salim. The Gambian Youth Organization, for those who don't know, is a volunteer-based organization of mostly full-time teachers, and it is just a block away from the building where the 2022 Bronx fire happened. They've provided aid to the victims of the 2022 Bronx fire since the incident last year. Documented also did a full coverage of the fire and has published follow-up articles about how the victims are faring. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read a paragraph from one of the recent pieces. A year later, some of the victims of the fire that killed 17 people in the Bronx have said they feel the city has not collaborated as they should have. As of last month, the city had only donated around half of the $3 million allocated for cash assistance to families. Immediately after the fire, families were given $2,250 each, and on a case-by-case basis, some families were given additional aid. Families were also given debit cards containing $10,000. However, families have said it's not enough. One of them specifically said that the $10,000 in aid she has received a couple months after the fire happened doesn't come close to helping to rebuild her life. Indeed, $10,000 only amounts to just 5 months of rent for an average one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. And these families still have to purchase food and other necessities to fend for themselves. Salim, GYO has worked very closely with these families since the fire happened. Can you share GYO's experience assisting the families so far, the experience with or the experience with getting or not getting aid from the city, and how the families are faring today?
Sounds good. Thank you, Fisayo, and I want to thank the Africa Center, and I want to thank, and I see Haddy, Robert, and Melissa. It was really nice seeing you guys again, because we have worked in the past. But yeah, so I would just like to share, GYO's experience providing assistance. And as you said, GYO, we are a volunteer-based organization, founded in 2002. We actually turned 20 last year, and we couldn't celebrate it because, of the relief efforts, but we will have a chance to, celebrate that 20-year, I can say anniversary or birthday of GYO. But yeah, so, from the first day, that we heard of the fire, GY opened our community center, for donations to provide essential goods to residents of 333. Because, we had like a food pantry that we ran every week that served close to 400 families a week or even more than that. We literally went through our pantry list and that night and started calling, families to check in on them. And that's how we even learned, like, unfortunately, from the Bakum family, like 2 kids, she lost 2 of her kids on that day. And we also, like a day later, we lost our own former member with Sarah Jane, who we still miss like so much. And, that's really affecting us. So with the help of the outstanding community in New York and around the country, all over the world, I can say, we raised $1 million in like 4 days. But that came with, challenges as well, because being, a youth-led organization, you can say, even though not everybody's, we're not kids, but at the same time, at that time, I don't think I had a beard at that time, or maybe I did, but so, they came with some challenges, because we were African and youth-led. And some folks, felt like, we didn't have that much experience to distribute the funds, without any third party or through the government. So, of course, a lot of talk happened, a lot of doubt was spewed. But again, GYO, we had like one mission to do, like, we had one mission just to do what's right for the families. But yeah, so with GYO's funds, like the $1 million that we received, up to date, we have distributed more than $700,000 to the families. We're currently in our second phase of providing funds to the secondary families. Secondary families are folks that, because you already know, in the Bronx, we're crowded up in, these units. So there's secondary families, and we had to even advocate for a bit. So right now we are like providing funds to those families, and also folks that unfortunately have been hospitalized as well. But yeah, that's what GYO has been doing. I don't know how much time I have, but there's a lot. There's a lot I can say, but
I'll come back to you with more questions as well. But I also want to ask, when we're having a conversation, you told me that some of the mechanisms that you guys used to navigate the situation, you had to create from scratch to help these families, the families of the deceased, and also victims of the fire incident who were displaced because of the fire. And can you share with me like what some of those mechanisms were, and also how the GYO was able to get the resources to them?
Yeah, we had to literally start from scratch. Like we didn't have no playbook to go by. The relief efforts we should do was literally, we started with COVID-19 relief, which we served like 10,000 families like in 2020 to 2022. But we did not have a playbook. So we did reach out to other organizations that can help us out a bit, provide us with some guidance. And we literally went on the ground. Like we didn't even have a full list of families. We had to literally go to the building, jot down their names. Haddy was here at that time. Haddy came all the way down. I appreciate you forever for doing that, you and UndocuBlack. But literally came down, and we literally went to the building, started taking out the names of families, and started creating a plan out of nothing. But yeah, so the reason why we had to also start from scratch is because collaboration a little bit was not there, because again, the trust issue, the trust of African organizations that's being led by young people. It's like, we don't really trust you with this information. We don't trust that you're gonna do what's right. So from the city, I think that could have been, I'm gonna go into like recommendations, because I have a ton of recommendations that could have been
Can you give us like three of those recommendations?
Yeah, no, I know we don't have enough time. I mean, I would say like first, like even with the allocation, like choosing a contractor, I feel like, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, the contractor that they chose did not do a great job, because they did a phenomenal job. They did a great job, but always, you know, there's always room for improvement. But I feel like, you know, it should have been 2 other organizations who are like, you know, African led, that would have been a part of that as well. That could have been a part of the, you know, the decision making, but that would have been a part of, you know, being a part of like decision making, be on the table, because certain decisions that were being made, you know, GY were not in the room. And then after that, it affects not GY is not in the room, or folks that don't really understand the community, they're not in the room. And then that, you know, it affects the families, you know, negatively. So we have families coming over to us, asking us questions, well, we don't know as well, because we left out of the loop. So that could have been one recommendation. Another one, you know, like even having a clear communication line with the families, you know, literally just providing families with updates as to, you know, this was happening, even with transparency with the funding. Actually, I could say for the mayor's fund, some folks didn't know how much was raised. Some folks don't know, they didn't know where, they still till date don't know, like, where has the fund been allocated. So these are some of the stuff that I feel like, you know, could have been, you know, a little better from that the city could have done better with. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Salim. And I'm going to come back to you with about two more questions. But now I'm going to bring up Robert Agyemang, who is the New York director for African Communities Together. African Communities Together is an organization of African migrants who have been fighting for civil rights, opportunities, and a better life for African families within and outside the US. And they do this by providing a range of services and by mobilizing African immigrant communities to speak out on issues that affect their lives. Thank you so much for being with us today, Robert.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. And all the best to GYO. They've done so much great work and got kind of caught up in a lot of political crossfires. So I want to continue to help raise them and continue to support them and everything that they're doing for those families.
Thank you. And you co-authored a recent piece where you stated that immigration policy impacts everything from social services to work authorization. And I'm just going to read a paragraph from the piece as well. You said people need food, housing, medical aid, and employment. But before anything else, they need legal assistance and a court date, which is where the system first fails them. Can you tell us a little bit about the point you made in this article? How is the immigration court system broken right now? How are challenges with the court system affecting asylum seekers today? And how does this impact the work of your organization in successfully helping migrants?
So there's several layers to what's happening. And because the country for a very long time has chosen to continue to kind of postpone any kind of strategic framework for what immigration is in this country, it continues to kind of backload and backlog on all the different systemic things that we have, right? So a person first comes in seeking asylum, for example, the hope is to get a court date so that will allow them to be able to now transition into, while the process for them to getting asylum is ongoing, that they're now able to start building their life, right? They can be able to work legally and start being, access some of the resources that are typically available, right? But what's happening is there's this backlog of, especially since COVID, but before then, there's this backlog of so many cases that have not been seen in the court. There's even in some states where there's not enough judges for immigration court, and that's leading to this backlog. And so there's just not enough support and enough systemic support in the area of immigration court, immigration services, that's kind of leading to this excessive backlog. Some folks are not able to see a judge for, I believe it's almost 3 years, 795 days, I believe. In some cases, we're talking about almost 2 million immigrants not being able to see a judge for a very long time. And it's causing all sorts of unnecessary backlog. I think this is something that if the country had chosen to move on some form of immigration framework that would move us beyond kind of this broken system we have now, that these things could have been addressed or in the process of being addressed. And because they continue to choose to kick the can down the road or not address it at all, right? So they start doing that. This leads us to the place where we are, where there's lines of people that have to show up a day before, the night before to get in line to try to see the judge. And if they're not there in time, by the time the police come in the morning, they tell them they have to come back the next day at a certain time. It's really insane.
It's truly a problematic situation. Documented has also covered, some of those issues that you mentioned. Recently, I was speaking with a judge from NIGE, National Association of Immigration Judges, and he mentioned that despite the fact that the EOIR has been hiring more judges recently, they haven't been hiring enough staff to support the judges, which is also problematic because, the government can't keep hiring judges without funding or giving them the support that they've requested and they've said constantly that they need. So I'm glad that you addressed, you went in depth to the situation. ACT is currently joining over 100 organizations to demand for the designation of TPS for the Democratic Republic of Congo. And for those who don't know, Congo is experiencing one of the deadliest armed conflicts in modern human history. And so Congolese migrants in the US urgently need temporary protected status. The war in Congo has been devastating for the Congolese community in the diaspora and at home, especially where the death toll has risen to more than 5 million. There were 1,600 deaths in 2022 and more than 180,000 displaced people in the last few months alone. It is indeed one of the longest war, or if not the longest, that the African continent has experienced. My question to you is, how will the designation of TPS and SSR for Congo challenge the ongoing racial disparities Black migrants face in immigration? And I know that ACT is also trying to push for TPS as well for Mali and Mauritania. And I would like you to also shed more light on this.
So thank you for that. One of the things that we've been trying to do is trying to be very thoughtful around how we continue to raise awareness for, all our different brethren and sistren and family from the countries back home, and how we can be supportive here. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is to try and raise these campaigns around TPS, especially given some of the circumstances that our people face back home, whether it's civil war or personal attacks on their livelihood. There's still a lot of things that are going on back home that are not healthy or safe. And it creates an environment that necessitates an immediate move for folks to find safety, to find a place where they can be able to, live their life. So the TPS campaigns that we're raising regarding DRC, regarding Mali, Mauritania, and some of the other countries, it's really strategically around having some embedded support based on the system that we have here in this country, to be able to have them, when they arrive, that they're able to have this specific designation, which allows them, certain rights and certain privileges. It's not, these are temporary solutions, but within the framework that this country is working under, these are the solutions that kind of work best. And it allows for certain level of support. And we think that these conditions in the DRC warrant a TPS status that will allow the folks to be able to freely come here and be able to escape what's going on back home, as well as in Mali, Mauritania, and there's several countries we're also beginning to ramp up TPS campaigns for.
And I know that recently Somalia was recently redesignated or designated TPS, and ACT was also part of the organizations that lent a voice to ensuring that happened. As some of the, while pushing for TPS to be designated for the countries that we just mentioned, are you guys trying to implement some of the strategies that you implemented before? Like what worked in making that campaign successful?
I think one of the things that's usually extremely helpful within these kind of campaigns is the willingness of folks to share their stories. We found several members who were willing to share their story, how their lives were impacted back home, how the TPS designation would help them or has, helped others that can be helpful to them, and what the way that they want to move forward and live their life and be, trustworthy citizens here, right? I think that the willingness to share the story, and then also being able to have that story amplified and shared with the decision makers, and being able to do that in a way where it's not, I guess, annoying to them, right? But in a way, when you're advocating, you have to be annoying, but in a specific way, so that you can move things along and you can continue to have those conversations. So having a lot of the Somali community come out, be supportive, be active and engaged in the campaign has proven to be very successful in that. And we're hoping to have the same with the Malayan community, with the Congolese community, and being able to really put them forward and show that these are strong people who are willing to do what's necessary for what they need.
Are there organizations that you guys are working with to ensure that the campaigns for Mali, Congo, and Mauritania is also a successful one? And is there anything that members of the audience or even panelists today with us can do in ensuring that it happens?
We will definitely share more information as the campaign ramps up. We will definitely share more information about because each TPS campaign is a little different, but we will be having actions and ways that people can engage and be active in it. And so we will definitely share more information as the time comes on. We're still in strategy building mode right now, having conversations with the different members of the community, helping them to connect with others across the country. We're building it up. And we do have other partner organizations that are helping in this as well. It's not just us. UndocuBlack has been very helpful in a lot of the things. A lot of our campaigns, the CUSP collaboration, it has been very helpful with Haitian Bridge Alliance, with ADICAR. I feel like I'm forgetting a few others, which is why I tried not to name all the organizations.
No problem at all. I guess for people who would like to help who are on the call today, you can follow African Communities Together on their social media pages to know how far these campaigns are going and where your help comes in. Thank you so much for highlighting all of those, Robert. And now I would like to bring up Haddy Gassama, who is the National Director of Policy and Advocacy for the UndocuBlack Network. As we all know, it's Black History Month, and this Black History Month, UndocuBlack has tagged almost all of its tweets with the tagline, "Immigration is a Black issue." I would like you to shed some light on the push and the need to root out anti-Blackness from the US immigration system, as you guys keep pushing for. And right now, in what ways are Black immigrants currently not being recognized and included?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, to the organizers of this event, and so much love to my co-panelist. It's so heartening to share this space with you all. GYO, I also just have to quickly just give them a shout out, because I don't think we can overstate how incredible of an organization this is, and the work that they have done for that community in the past year as it relates to relief efforts around that fire. Salim is super humble and he will probably not say it, but I think that the work that GYO did and the leadership that they had in that response doesn't even come close to the federal or state entities whose responsibilities it was to protect and take care of that community. So I'm gonna start there.
Thank you so much for, I appreciate the way you all are giving him the props, because recently he told me that he even had to leave his job for a while just to help with, you know, the work of helping families that were affected by the fire.
Yeah.
So we all appreciate the work that the Gambian Youth Organization has done and continues to do.
100%. I think in regards to your question, so for UndocuBlack, the tagline "Immigration is a Black issue" is our organizational motto. It's our organizational tagline. It's on our like merch, t-shirts, everything. So it's not just a Black History Month thing. And it's a very simple statement, but it is within the general immigrants' rights movement. It's also still like a very radical assertion to make that immigration is a Black issue and that Black immigrants exist, because oftentimes within advocacy or like the larger media and narrative apparatuses in this country, we're often willfully erased. And the consequence of that is when it comes to policy making and decision making, again, our experiences are not considered. And so that's kind of the thinking around the hashtag or tagline. I think more generally for us, when we approach this work, whether it's through policy, advocacy, community wellness, community engagement, I think UBN also likes to really zoom out a bit into the history of this country, right? And why the experiences of Black migrants is so unique and oftentimes like very disparate as compared to other non-Black migrants. Every form of enforcement in this country, whether it's local policing or immigration enforcement, are derivatives of slave patrols, who are essentially white vigilantes deputized to hunt formerly enslaved Black people. And so when you look at it from that vantage point, then, you know, we can know that every form of policing, whether it's ICE, CBP, or NYPD, come from a history of white supremacy and inherent violence against Black folks. And so when Black migrants come into this country with that system, it's not shocking that they oftentimes bear the heaviest brunt of that system. And so for us, that's kind of the vantage point we like to approach this work with, that immigration is a Black issue, and resolving some of these immigration harms and disparities is going to take a very clear racial equity lens.
Thank you. And Black migrants in detention, I'm sure many of whom you've heard direct stories from at UndocuBlack, the UndocuBlack network, have often reported that the abuse they endure in the hands of government officials stem from discrimination based on their race. Examples include agents yelling at people in the course of arrest, telling them they do not belong in the US and making fun of them for not understanding English language. But also beyond the detention system itself, Black and African migrants experience the US immigration system differently, as you've highlighted. Can you speak to this and what executive and legislative changes are needed to decriminalize migration and to address some of these racial disparities in the system?
Sure. We recently, late last year, actually put out, I think, 2 important reports that speak to this, both of which were collaborative efforts with UndocuBlack, Freedom for Immigrants, BAJI, Law for Black Lives, Movement for Black Lives. And those 2 reports, one focuses specifically on the experience of Black migrants in immigration detention. Statistically, when Black migrants are in detention, they're detained for longer periods of time than their non-Black counterparts. When they have the opportunity to be released on bond, their bond amount is oftentimes 3, 4, 5 times higher than their non-Black counterpart. Even the flyer of this event, you see the gentleman holding the Defend Black Immigrant sign. That's my friend and colleague in the movement, Daniel Tay, and he will tell you, Daniel is a Cameroonian migrant who was detained for, I believe, over a year. And Daniel's bond amount compared to the person who he shared a cell with was like 4 times higher than the non-Black person he shared a cell with. That's just one example. When Black migrants are detained, they oftentimes are put in solitary confinement at higher rates and for longer periods of time than their non-Black counterparts. And then when we talk about it from the criminalization lens, that's another thing. Immigration law in general does not belong within the criminal law system of the United States. It is a civil matter. So immigration infractions technically are civil infractions, but again, the United States has managed really at the detriment of Black migrants to criminalize migration, as you put it. There's, we use the term prison to deportation pipeline. Black migrants make a relatively smaller percentage of the overall immigrant population of this country, but we are deported at an astronomically higher rate than our other immigrant counterparts. And that's not by accident, right? It is because we are also criminalized at a higher rate. We live in over-policed neighborhoods. And so when we get involved with the criminal justice system, you can serve your time and be released, and then you're immediately plunged into the immigration consequence space. And so one of the things our other report highlights is the relationship between the criminal justice system and the immigration system. I'll just highlight 2 laws that have fundamentally inflated this carceral system in the US. And that is the 1994 crime bill. We're talking New York here, so most folks are familiar with like the Central Park 5, for example. The experiences of those young men are like a direct result of that crime bill, which was really designed to criminalize Black folks. 2 years after that was the 1996 immigration bill, which also was designed to then provide criminal consequences for immigrants, and it ended up criminalizing immigrants. And so for Black migrants who are susceptible to both the 94 bill and the 96 bill, it's like they're being punished twice. And so as a result of the interaction of those, I think, very deliberate attacks on our communities, we see this like really skewed kind of impact on Black migrant communities today.
Thank you so much, Haddy. And as we just highlighted the ongoing racial disparities and policies that are affecting Black migrants in immigration system in the US, I would like to bring up Melissa Johnson. Melissa Johnson is the New York organizer for Black Alliance for Just Immigration. Thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa. She also educates the public about the marginalization of Black communities within both the immigration and criminal justice systems, and advocates for just and comprehensive immigration policy. And now I'd like us to speak about Title 42, which has been in limbo for like 3 years, or been, well, it was established in 2020, and next month will be the 3rd year since the policy was installed, and we're still not sure if there's a true end in sight for the policy. And for those who don't know, Title 42 is the public health policy which the federal government has used to regulate border crossings under the premise of increased COVID-19 precautions. And a lot has been said and written about how it affects nationals from Central America and South America, and rightly so. However, the policy adversely impacts Black asylum seekers too, as many advocates have said, and also as many reports have shown, including a recent report from the New York Times, which basically highlighted the facts. I mean, the headline was basically African and invincible. I mean, many people in the news, many reports in the news have been written about how migrants from the border, recently arrived in the city, and New York City's response, the New York City administration's response to those migrants. But unbeknownst to many people, until this report came out, a lot of people didn't know that there were also a lot of Africans who were leaving the same countries that these asylum seekers were fleeing from. And it just goes to show how the policy also affects and impacts Black asylum seekers too, Black and African asylum seekers too. BAJI has remained steadfast in saying that the Title 42 policy is racist and should be terminated, by leading campaigns demanding an end to the policy. And next month is going to mark year 3 since the policy was installed, and I would like you to shed some light on the apparent limbo, what still needs to be done, and what those on the call today can do to help.
Thank you, and greetings, everyone. My name is Melissa Johnson again. I'm a proud Jamaican migrant and proud resident of Brooklyn. I'm also glad to be in community with you all. What I think it's important to acknowledge is that this is a conversation about the community and all of our Black migrant communities. So I'm proud to represent the Caribbean and Afro-Caribbean part of the community, which is important to lift up because we're not alone in this struggle and not alone in this fight for the protection and liberation of Black migrants. So as you mentioned, I'm the New York organizer for BAJI, and just want to be able to touch on a little bit about what Title 42 is, so then we can talk about where we are now and why it's in limbo. So last December, the US Supreme Court ruled that Title 42 will remain in effect as legal challenges continue to the policy. So what this sets up is a dangerous scenario which allows states to dictate the fates of thousands of migrants who become subject to whims of what we know are racist governors and Republicans, and that lead Republican states, which in effect has an impact and history of racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, anti-reproductive justice, and human rights movement, which impacts Black migrants intimately because we're not a monolith. We arrive with all our identities from all around the world, right? It's not just African migrants from the continent, it's Caribbean migrants, it's Afro-Latino migrants, Black migrants from Central and South America. So we're arriving with all of these identities. And what we know about Title 42 is that it's never been about public health. It's never been about the protection of people in the US or the protection of people at the border. It has been strategically anti-Black, it has been targeted, and it has disproportionately impacted us. So Title 42 was enacted and introduced by the Trump administration in March 2020, which allowed for the US to immediately deport migrants, specifically Black migrants, claiming that it would stop the spread of COVID-19. Title 42 is a policy. It is not a public health measure or practice and cannot stop the spread of COVID-19, right? What does stop the spread of COVID-19 is masking, is distancing, is vaccines, is good health practices and public health policies that actually protect and care people, not a policy that restricts and limits the human right of migration and mobility and intimately and directly targets a group of people because of their race and skin color. What we know is that migrants at the border, only a small fraction of the population of people coming in and out of the US. We know that people go on vacations and travel and are moving in from all around the world. And folks at the border are only a small number of people coming in. So to say that the policy would protect folks from COVID or protect the US from the spread of COVID is a lie. And it's something that we know that the US government has done before in order to protect its own agenda and benefits, right? But what is true is that BAJI is calling for the Biden administration to end this policy because we know it disproportionately impacts Black migrants who are then left at the border, who are deported back to Mexico, left at the border to the violence and anti-Black violence they're subjected to in disparate conditions, anti-Black and racist conditions where they're left vulnerable. However, what we also know is true simultaneously is that while Black migrants are being targeted, harassed, and deported through Title 42, we see the allowance of Ukrainian migrants who are rightfully fleeing from war and seeking asylum being given the red carpet rolled out to enter the United States by the US southern border and claim asylum. So we see this anti-Black violence targeted at Black migrants and showing up in the disparate treatment in the way that the immigration system treats Black and brown bodies versus white bodies, right? We know that because of criminalization of us as Black people and anti-Black policing built into the immigration system, Title 42 shows up in continuing to target us, to harass us, to inflict violence on us, and disproportionately deport us. So just want to name that first. As an important kind of clarifying point to what Title 42 is, what it has done, and why we're at limbo. I think the second part of your question was what still needs to be done?
What still needs to be done, and what stage are we in right now? Because there've been a lot of back and forth legislative-wise in Congress and the court to end the policy, and then Republican-led states file cases in court to say that it shouldn't be stopped. But where are we at the moment with this policy, and what still needs to be done? And is there an end in sight for the policy?
Right. Well, we're in limbo now. As I mentioned earlier, the Supreme Court ruled that it will remain in effect while challenges to the decision will continue on. What we can do, what needs to be done, and what BAJI is doing has called for the Biden administration to end the policy. We've called for the stop of deportations, particularly of Black and Haitian migrants who have been disproportionately deported at the border. And we're asking for this administration to show courage and commitment to racial equity by supporting vulnerable Black migrant asylum seekers, right? So what else can be done? Well, a couple of things. First, you can follow, donate, and volunteer with any of the frontline organizations on this call. We're in this together and we need your help. We can't do it alone. Our organizations provide a range of services, so direct service, legal services, state and federal advocacy, which BAJI does, as well as other Black migrant organizations across the country and mutual aid groups, right? We need your help, and we need the tremendous support to continue our work to protect people at the border, to fight the administration, and to call for policies that actually protect us and allow us a pathway to remain in the United States and to citizenship. So you can donate. Folks who are at the border or who are coming in as Black asylum seekers, we need food, clothing, baby products. I know that GYO has done an amazing job, and ACT does work too on collecting donations for folks. We also need help with securing housing and sheltering, picking up people from airports, buses, and bus transportation, and we need help with legal services and language access. What you can also do.
I know, sorry, we're running out of time, so I want to quickly bring back Salim and all the panelists, really. As you just spoke about language access, I know Salim told me that language access has been a big problem in the community, especially in light of the prior incident that happened. Can you also speak on the need for better civic education and education in the African communities in New York? The need to be better aware about some of the city laws, and how those have been lacking because of language access. And to that same point about language access, Melissa and Haddy, can you speak about the need for language access when it comes to things like, the CVP platform that people are supposed to sign up with, or Haitians are supposed to sign with, and they don't have the language of that platform in Haitian Creole. Yes, Salim, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say, my experience with language access, literally, even with the fire incident, we had problems with language access. Folks could not, we had folks struggling with interpretation with Wolof, and all the other African dialects. We can even see it clearly with the asylum seekers. And surprisingly, I was at one of the shelters, the men's shelter on 30th Street, they did not have, honestly, someone that spoke Spanish at that time. This was a couple of months ago. We literally had to call my friend to translate for some of the brothers there. I had to call some of my members, to translate, for Wolof. So language access is a huge need, and it ties into even civic engagement. How can folks know who's their city council member or who's all their laws if it's not in their language? Even with fire safety, if you're telling folks to close the door, is it in their language? Do they understand? So language access is a huge problem, and that needs to be solved. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. And Haddy, can you also speak to the need for language access and how you've seen that this is a major challenge in the work that you've been doing at UndocuBlack?
Sure, and I'll speak about it just from the context of CBP1, since you brought it up. And for those that don't know, CBP1 is this new app and program. So Melissa did a beautiful job talking about Title 42. One of the things that we've seen during the conversation around this program ending / being in limbo, but the Biden administration saying that they're preparing for it to end, is that they're also preparing to really replace it with something. And one of the announcements that came during late December, early January, was that when Title 42 ends, if it ends, that the administration plans on not allowing people to essentially use their international human right of seeking asylum directly at the southern border, but for a specific group of countries, one of which is a Black majority country, Haiti, that folks would have to apply for asylum in a country that is on literal and figurative fire before being able to come to the US. The other thing would be that if the people already find themselves at the southern border, in order for them to get a Title 42 exemption, if the program is still in place, they would need to apply for it through this app called CBP One. The app only comes in English and Spanish. What is frustrating is that on any given day in Reynosa or Tapachula or Matamoros, there are thousands, literally thousands of Haitian and other Black migrants that they didn't even consider. Fine, maybe some of our languages are not even written, but maybe French wasn't even a consideration. So it gives you an idea of really where the minds of the administration is when it comes to that. I'll quickly also say about CBP One is that it also excludes our people in various different ways. One, you need to be tech savvy. You need to actually have access to a phone, know how to use the app, have access to like good internet service in order to use the app to essentially get an exemption for Title 42. And it gives you like a number of appointments per day. Those appointments go like Beyonce tickets or something, like within minutes. And so you have our people who don't have the language, sometimes don't have the tech savvy, expected to use this so-called tool to allow them to, again, seek asylum, which is their international human right. So those are just some of the frustrations that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And just last little complaint is that the app also requires for the person to prove their identity by taking a photo. And because our people are Black and because AI is racist, sometimes it doesn't recognize their faces if like the lighting is not good. So these are all the like hurdles of challenges that the average person at the southern border seeking asylum has to face.
Thank you. Thank you so much for addressing that. And Melissa and Robert, are there language access challenges as well that you guys encounter while doing your advocacy work on a regular basis? Robert.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Language access is one of the biggest things that we work on here in African communities together. Last year, we were part of a campaign to have City Council actually make language access a focus, and they allocated $5 million towards the building of and the development of a community interpreter bank, as well as excuse me, the development of 3 language services community worker-owned co-ops. And what the languages that would be served through those co-ops would be the indigenous Asian languages, the indigenous Spanish languages, and the indigenous African languages. We have been developing this co-op for over 3 years, and by God's grace, we will be able to launch in maybe a month, carrying languages like Wolof and French, Mandingo, and Arabic, and a few others, and in the process of adding more language capacity, specifically for when we have issues with, arriving individuals, whether they're asylum seekers or otherwise, dealing with the differentialities that happened during COVID, where even French wasn't available to a lot of our community members because the city and the state did not, proactively communicate in those languages and other languages that our people communicated. It's highly prevalent in every aspect of the work that we do, which is why the staff we have, the majority of them are multilingual. One of our staff members, who's very awesome, is probably learning her 9th language right now. Because when doing the legal services that we do for our community, we need to be able to communicate and help them understand what is required, what is necessary, how they can be effective in their cases, and how we be able to help them move those cases along, how to be able to get the information from the forms that are required for them to file and all those different things. Language access comes in so many different forms that we have to continue to make that a priority for how we interact with all these different factions and members of the community. It's so prevalent in everything. And I'm still kind of shocked that we're having this conversation in 2023 when this thing has been going on since. So it's there every day when you come to the office and you see us interacting with community members from various countries, not even just Africans, some from Venezuela, some from the Ukraine, based off of the support that they need. Language access is there. So we've been making it a priority for us. We've been pushing the city and the state to make it a priority. The state has recently adopted a form of language access bill. We're in the process of trying to help them kind of guide it and make it stronger and interact with more arriving populations so that the folks who are in most need of it get it, and not the communities who have been here for several decades and have already adapted and acclimated. It's just really trying to ensure all of these things are taken care of.
Thank you for addressing that. Melissa, are there also language access problems that BAJI encounters regularly? And can you give us some of those specific situations as well?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to just add on to this point. I agree with, my colleagues and panelists here that, historically the state, the city at the city level, the state and at the federal level, we know that the government has treated us, and levels of government and public office has treated us as the diasporic community, the Afro-diasporic community, as Black communities, as unworthy, not valuable, and doesn't recognize our languages, or doesn't recognize the transitory nature of not just our movement, but also the way that language impacts our movement, and the ways that Black migrants have to be equipped with multiple languages to traverse through places, right? It's not just one language. That is, historic and intergenerational to us as Black folks, that we show up with multiple languages, right? That serve us in different capacities, whether it's your native tongue, whether it's your social language, whether it's your professional language. And so we do need increased language access to recognize how we use language in the way that best suits us, best protects us, and best offers us care and opportunity. So that's one, I would say with that. I would say for BAJI, we're seeing both at the border and as folks are arriving, as well as folks who have historically been here within the US, we don't have enough language access to cover not just the continent, but again, the Caribbean and Central and South America. We cannot forget, our Afro-Latinos who are coming with multiple languages, as well as our Garifuna community, who are coming with, their own Garifuna languages, as well as Patois. I can't, be on this panel and be a proud Jamaican and say that it is heyday that Patois be recognized as an official language to represent the Afro-Caribbean diaspora and community. And again, back to that point about it not being official for enough of us at the city and state level, which impacts our ability to access things like healthcare, education, health and hospitals, schools, jobs, as well as emergency services. If we can't pick up the phone and speak to someone in our own native language or languages, how can we receive the care that we need? We're also seeing that in the court systems as folks are going through immigration detention hearings, as folks are going through, proceedings for incarcerated as they're being incarcerated in state and federal institutions. And we're seeing that in the ways in which this pandemic has left us out. We cannot receive even the basic levels of care and support to even protect our health through the language that we need. So at multiple points, we're seeing that, and just want to again note that we need not only increased language access, but the recognition of multiple languages, even including sign language, right? Black folks have different sign language than white folks. It's just true because we use, so many colloquial terms. And for us, coming from the continent and the Caribbean, we know that there are only terms that are expressive in our own languages that are not going to show up in standard African American sign language. So we need to think about how to be inclusive in the ways and the forms that we're using languages to be able to communicate to our folks and support our folks.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Now I'm going to turn over this segment of the town hall to questions from our audience members. The first one here, and any of the panelists you can let me know which of the questions you would like to take. So the first question here, is there a need to create a leadership program to train or empower African leaders to get a better understanding of how city systems or services work and how to respond to them in times of crisis? Would this be helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this will be really helpful. And actually, there's a program right now by OEM that they are basically that GY will actually be a part of this program right now. Basically, it's a training that you would do with stakeholders. In case of a crisis, that you come up with a plan. In case a crisis arises, you have an action plan. Literally, maybe that would be helpful to us if we had that blueprint. You create a plan, so if a crisis arises that, you will be able to execute. So honestly, I think that, especially for the, Black community, African community, this is something that is lacking, or actually that we lack, that we will definitely benefit from. But also this ties into language access as well. It has to be in our language. There has to be something that we understand, because there's no way, we're going to be able to, better our community if we don't understand, the basic, just the language of it. So, yeah.
Thank you. And would anyone like to add to what Salim has just said, or should I move to the next question?
Just want to say that I think there's an opportunity for consular offices or, national foreign embassies of our countries to, step in and provide more leadership here as an extension of our national government and national leadership back home. No country and no state government is equal. We know that there are flaws, issues, and corruption from government to government. However, what I do know with foreign embassies and consulates here in the United States, their missions are supposed to be to protect and support their foreign nationals abroad. Furthermore, embassies and foreign consulate offices and officers, it's national and sovereignty inside the office. So once you step inside an office, most people don't know that. Once you step inside an embassy or consular office, you are on national territory of that country. And we need to utilize that more creatively, and we need to work with these embassies and these foreign dignitary offices and consular officers better. They need to be educated on the impacts of anti-Black violence, anti-Black racism in the United States, and xenophobia and the immigration and federal policies that impact Black migrants uniquely, but they also need to be aware of how they can better protect us while we're here. And now, it's true that not every office or government is equal and can be able to provide that support, but there are some who are equipped and can do that. And we need to work better with them, and they need to work better with us by being able to protect us better while we're here and provide support, especially when folks are going through detention and deportation hearings, how they can intervene to better protect us by not working with the US government and providing those documents to expedite deportation, but actually challenging and pushing back about why we should be deported in the first place and about migration being a human right. So just a creative and alternative thought about how we can utilize some of the resources that are already here.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And the next question from another audience member. Do you think the new federal program that will allow private citizens to sponsor refugees in the US has high potential to be advantageous for Africans here to bring their families into the US, or it's still going to be a very cumbersome process?
I can tackle that one. I you know, pessimistic me is going to say, because it's our people, it's probably going to be the latter. Historically, it's just always been the case. And I think it's important to note that there are, I think, a couple of like newish programs around that. One of the ones I mentioned is the one where like someone can apply in home country. And so that's like Haiti, I believe Venezuela, and I believe there's also a sponsorship program for Ukrainians. Surprise, surprise. That one preceded all the other two that I listed. But this new one specifically pertaining to refugees, I think it's important to like underscore that term refugee, which has a specific legal meaning separate from asylum seeker. And it really has to do with where the person is. In order for someone to be designated as a refugee, they really have to go through a rigorous process of being vetted and being qualified and being able to then be quote unquote resettled in the US. And currently the US actually does not accept as many refugees as this country has enough wealth to welcome. There are actually countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are much more welcoming to refugee populations. The issue is most people don't want to be resettled in those countries. Folks want to be resettled in Western countries. I say that to say that I think it's called like the Welcoming Corps or something like that, Strengthening Communities. Welcoming Corps is the program. And it's also under, because it's refugees, it's also under the Department of State, not so much like DHS. If you've noticed, like the people speaking about it are like Secretary Blinken instead of like DHS Secretary Mayorkas. These small little, I think, details matter because again, it's like, it goes back into just the US's even their like foreign policies and relationships with some of these countries, even the politics around recognizing who qualifies as a refugee, even like what conflicts the US like determines as a real conflict for people needing to seek safety. I don't want to go on too long, but I'll harp on Ukraine again because I think it's just a really clear example of how anti-Blackness shows up within these policy-making spaces. When the conflict in Ukraine started, 8 days after the official start of that conflict, Ukraine was designated TPS. At that point, we were, I think, working on the TPS campaign for Cameroon, which was like multiple years in. Cameroon at the time had, I think, 4 separate but active armed conflicts going on. And we did not get the designation for TPS for Cameroon until after the Ukraine designation was placed. So I just want to, not to be pessimistic or anything, but I'm just, with this country's history of how they've treated migrants from our part of the world, I don't know that it would be any different when it comes to this new refugee sponsorship program.
And I'll just move to the next question now. Thank you so much, Haddy, for going in depth into that. What state efforts are you supporting or involved with right now? And any of the panelists can also take on this question. If there are state efforts that you're either supporting, or I take it that there are no state efforts that any of our panelists are involved with. So I'm going to move to the next question.
Oh, sorry. We are involved in some state efforts. I was waiting to see if anybody was going to respond. But BAJI, we do education and advocacy work to be able to, represent all Black migrants and speak to the issues that impact us. not just at the border, but at the city, the state, and the federal level. So here in New York, we're looking at a few different campaigns and issues impacting Black migrants. First, we're thinking about asylum seekers and coming in and thinking about how there's been a pitting against Black migrants or asylum seekers coming in, and then other vulnerable communities in the city. And so we're trying to close that gap by providing further education that the city and the state should be providing resources to all vulnerable communities, including asylum seekers and Black migrants, right? Is that the city is not providing shelter and housing to migrants as they're coming in. Well, the city and the state should be providing it to all vulnerable communities. So our houseless and homeless folks, our individuals who are struggling, who are already in the shelter system. So we need to expand our shelter system and access to basic services, food, education, jobs, so we can protect and support all folks. So that's one of the first kind of state campaigns or city campaigns that we're thinking about or we're looking at and actively working on. Additionally, we're in the coalition to support clemency. So clemency is a process of gubernatorial. The governor can provide pardons and commutations of criminal incarceration charges to be able to protect folks from deportation. So if you get a pardon from the governor, which would be the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, it can help protect folks from being deported. So if you are incarcerated inside a New York state jail or federal or state prison, you have the ICE can transfer you from that state institution to an immigrant detention center and then put you on a pathway or a pipeline, as we call it, to deportation. However, if you receive a pardon from the governor, it can help prevent that deportation of that individual. So we're looking at that as a tool in the toolbox to protect and support folks at the state level. And we're also thinking about the campaign Dignity Not Detention, where we're looking at detention of migrants in the state of New York and looking to close those detention facilities in the state of New York and not transfer folks from New York State immigrant detention centers to outside the state where they're more vulnerable to deportation. So those are the three active campaigns we're working on at the state level.
Thank you so much,
also,
okay.
We are also active
at
the state with several campaigns. We're engaged in the Dignity Not Detention. We're also engaged in the New York for All, which would end the collusion between ICE and all official agencies of the state, whether it's law enforcement or government agencies. There's the separation of both communication and entanglements with those different entities. So we're involved in that. And then also we're continuing our Break the Shackles campaign, which we were able to get passed into law. So it would end the excessive fees charged by these agencies that are acting like bond agencies, but they're really just forcing folks who are detained into these uncompromising contracts that have no real end date and are forcing our folks into both electronic monitoring and also ankle shackles so that folks would not be able to really be able to live their lives. So now that it's signed into law that that's being prohibited and that space is being regulated, by the state, and these actors are not able to just kind of be liberal with the way that they do these contracts. We're now working in the implementation phase where we're now actively working to get folks who are in these contracts out of them legally, but also to be able to get back to the peace of mind that they were trying to have and be able to live a effective life and take care of their families. So we're promoting those. We're still promoting language access statewide, pushing for stronger and more effective language access and language support for arriving communities, as I mentioned earlier. So those are some of the things that we're looking at statewide and trying to make sure that all of our people are continuing to be at the table wherever is necessary.
Thank you so much, Robert. And the next question from another audience member says, to what extent have Black and African immigrant advocacy groups been able to find alignment and space with the larger organizations that have bigger platforms and access to lawmakers?
I think it's a really good question around sort of movement building, but also creating spaces for ourselves. Because I think our organizations also have quite a bit of power, and our members and our people have a lot of political power. And I think over the years, I've also seen how, you know, our posture has changed, even when it comes to like proximity to that power, and who we also have contacts with. So I will say, I think we're a little less reliant on, you know, having the connection with the giant, like the ACLUs or whatever, like, which are, they're great partners. I'm not knocking them, but I'm just saying, I do want to frame it that these Black immigrant organizations are powerful within themselves. I think what I've also enjoyed in this work is also us doing coalition building amongst ourselves. Robert introduced CUSP earlier, and I think that's one of those really beautiful spaces. It's actually like one of my favorite collaborative spaces to work within. And CUSP, really the idea behind it was that if we are the quote unquote like forgotten or marginalized folks, well, all of us are going to get together over here and try to figure this out. So it stands for Communities United for Status and Protection. It includes the UndocuBlack Network, African Communities Together, Haitian Bridge Alliance, ADICAR, which is our Nepali organization, NAC, which is the National Network of Arab American Communities. I don't know, Robert, you're right. I'm like, is that
Haitian
all of
Bridge.
them? Haitian Bridge Alliance. I'm like, it's always one that I forget, and Haitian Bridge Alliance. So this is like this beautiful and radical space of Black, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and Asian migrants really coming together and bringing our communities along to you know, really fight this fight. And I think since the collaborative or coalition has launched, we've made tremendous strides, especially when it comes to our TPS campaigns in particular. We've had a lot of TPS victories under our belt in the last couple of years, and that's not nothing. I think we've also had a lot of other successful campaigns and community building campaigns, because it's also not always, the policy is important, right? And we want to get our folks protection, but I also think there's beauty in us, like not just being in survival mode, but just like being in community with one another. And I think places like CUSP create a lot of that. It's not every day that you get to be in a room where the Nepali aunties and the West African aunties are like dancing together and exchanging recipes. And CUSP creates that space. So I guess my short answer to the question is, I don't know that there's so much of a like strong need to rely on the quote unquote big organizations for us to get more access to power. I think we've been consistently doing the power building, and we're gonna continue that.
Sounds good. And I'm going to now turn over the final question, which I would like all the panelists to answer in their own way. Salim, how can students become involved and contribute to the effort of the Gambian Youth Organization right now?
Yeah, definitely. We are launching our like internship program. We have more than like 300 requests, you know, for folks that want to volunteer. We currently have like 2 interns right now, but we are like going to officially like launch an internship program where, you know, some young folks can definitely, you know, join and contribute to the efforts that we're doing. But yeah, so be on the lookout for that. And I'll put out IG, because I see that you guys are putting your handles in there. I'll put that in there as well, so folks can follow us as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Melissa, how can people on the call today, and students especially, help in the work of help add to the work that BAJI is doing? How can they support the organization?
Thank you. Well, I hope all the organizations on the call are supported. You know, we're in community with each other. This call is a community call for us, we're colleagues in the work and in the struggle for the liberation of Black people, particularly Black migrants, but we're also in this because of the love for community, right? I would be remiss if I didn't say that, we're still in the week of love, right? And so this conversation is out of love for community and how we're thinking about how we expand that love to be able to show up and protect people in community and keep us safe. At BAJI, we say we keep us safe. And I would, just echo what Haddy said about us showing up as Black organizations and thinking largely about the Black community and our relationship to each other. And so if you're thinking about supporting any of us, don't just follow us, don't just subscribe or like, we're not just asking for donation of funds, we're asking also for a hand and time, because there's so much need and not enough capacity to support the need, right? So if you're hearing, or you're seeing where you can log on, click, follow, join to sign up. We really do need the help. For BAJI, again, language access. We're looking for folks who can provide different kinds of language, including, sign language services to be able to help some of the legal services work that we do, as well as our organizing work. We're out in the street trying to educate people about the relationship between the carceral system in this country and the immigration system, and how, the criminal justice system or the criminal legal system, because it's not just, but the criminal legal system influences and impacts the ways that the immigration system treats us as Black folks. So you can log on to our website, look at some of our reports and our statements, follow us on our social media, and come out and talk to people, hear about the different kinds of immigration issues that are impacting them, and stand with us as we challenge not only the federal government and the Biden administration, right, but we call on local leaders to stand in protecting folks, right? You can call your local state senators or your US senators and US Congress people and ask for them to end Title 42 and stop the deportation now, right? You can also join us in the movement for abolition and say that, borders are carceral and that should not stop the human right of migration of people. You can also join us in saying that, jails and prisons, directly target Black communities and Black migrants and disproportionately harm us and cause violence and threaten and break up our communities and families. And then you can learn more about all the things that we're getting into on the state and the city level at our website. So I'll stop right there and share the time.
Thank you so much. And Robert, I would like to come to you to also shed some light briefly in a minute or two about how students can become involved and contribute to the efforts of the African communities together, especially those in the diaspora as well, those on the African continent right now. How can they help? How can they contribute to the work that organizations are doing here in New York City and in the US?
So there's several ways that students can be involved and contribute to what's going on with all of us here, right? The students, they're younger, so I'm gonna speak in their young tongue, right? We're outside. We outside. Y'all come meet us outside. UndocuBlack is outside. BAJI is outside. GYO is outside. ACT is outside. We're working with the folks directly in our community. We're working with folks across the board. We're working with each other. We're trying to get things moving on behalf of all of us in the diaspora. So we have membership. If you want to know a lot of what's going on, whether it's campaign, whether it's volunteer work, whether it's dealing with different actions federally, statewide, citywide, we come learn about how to be members, learn about the work that we're doing, and that will help you to kind of get an understanding of what's going on. We actually even are working with Barnard College to continue our Forward Ever podcast that we started last year, where we're kind of documenting the stories of Africans who have been in New York City. And, private plug, my parents were part of the, one of the episodes, but you can catch that on our YouTube page. Get engaged with what's happening, right? You can connect with us on so many levels. There's so much work that needs to be done. And I just want to highlight that there is so much work that needs to be done. We need the youthful energy to continue to push for liberation for our people. We need that youthful energy. So check us, you can come on our website, which is africans.us. You can send us a note there. You can send me a note, robert@africans.us. We can get you plugged into what's going on. There's so much that needs to be done with all of our organizations because we're all pushing in the same direction and we all need to have the youthful energy there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And thank you so much to all the speakers today. Haddy, thank you, Robert, Melissa, and Salim. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would also like to thank the Africa Center for, again, providing this platform for us to speak about these issues. Today, there are several issues that we were not able to cover in this short time span today, but by following the work of these organizations, either through their website or via social media platforms, you'll be able to see and follow more of the work that they are doing there. The African Center also holds several of these programs that addresses these issues all the time, as well as documented. The publication I work for, we always write about stories affecting migrants and policies that are affecting them as they happen, so you can be updated regularly. Thank you so much. And now I would like to turn over the chat to the Africa Center, and we're done. Thank you, everyone.